Alright, peace to you, ladies and gentlemen. How are you? Now, I thought I would make this quick video as I'm walking to work, and really, I want to reflect on a book which I just started reading, and it's René Guénon's The Crisis of Modernity. And I really believe that's an essential book for a lot of young and even older men in general, to read. And for those who are not aware of what René Guénon has done in this work, is basically what he's going for is the time that we live in today. I think he died in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, so he was still in modernity, he was still in the modern world, more or less. And what he's doing is, the time that we live in today of just pure decadence and spiritual wickedness and materialism and vanity and vacuousness, this kind of dead, secular, atheistic society. What we all reside in the modern world, he's basically giving it context. He's trying to explain what led to the certain thought patterns that we have, and also he's trying to give it like a broader timeline. He sees the world in the same way I see it. This is Quranic as well. He basically sees it in such a way where the world and civilizations, they go through cycles and seasons, right? You have a boon, a great intellectual awakening where people understand things like God and morality and righteousness and piety, and then slowly from there things start to degenerate, and we're at kind of the final stage of degeneration before utter humiliating and terrible collapse, right? So he's kind of giving a broader historical context to why we have entered the phase that we're in today. And basically one thing that he goes on about, René Guénon, is he talks about how pretty much every civilization that has existed in world history, every phase or epoch has had its own marked character, its own, one moment, there's a train going by me. Yeah, so every civilization that's existed has its own marked character, a certain philosophical, what's the word I'm looking for, polarity, a charge to it. And when you read his book, you really understand what time we live in, right? We live, contrary to what the moderns say, the futurists say, the technocrats say, oh, we live in a great, awakening. Look at all the cars and all this stuff that we have, and wireless connections and Bluetooth. We live in a great awakening. Humanity has unlocked their intellect. No. We do not live in that at all. We actually live in a dark age, In the, what Guénon talks about is, in the Hindu tradition, this was known as the Kali Yuga, the darkest, the most basest of conditions until final, eventual, terrible collapse, right? So, like I was saying though before, he talks about how every civilization has its marked character to it, and the marked character to the society we live in today is its complete lack of appetite for anything of a higher order. So things like God, things like destiny, things like purpose, things like morality, piety, divine duty, things that whether, let's say somebody of 2,000 years ago or whatever, whether he lived by those principles or not is a separate issue. He at least understood them in concept. But nowadays, we live in such a civilization where we don't even understand or have the appetite for such things. It's very agnostic and atheist and cut off from the divine. And, when you understand that, you understand the time that you live in, a time of, like, basically, as it were, God has given every one of us more or less a spiritual antenna, right? I'm not waxing metaphysical on you. I'm just kind of giving you an analogy and an example. Humanity, naturally, we desire things like the divine, like righteousness, like purity, like piety, like destiny, like God, right? And this is, as it were, our spiritual antenna. It's meant to connect to things of a higher order, a higher nature, a higher status. But what we live in today is a society which has essentially cauterized and destroyed that spiritual antenna. And again, we have no appetite for these things. It's all just material goods and gains. Who can shop the most, who can screw with the most loose women, who can boast of their wealth the most, etc., etc. And one example I can give you of, and this is not an example he gives, but an example I'm going to give you of what René Guénon is talking about, the marked lack of interest in things of a higher nature, which is characteristic of our civilization, is even the idea of how we form our governments. So, in the past, in the ancient world, essentially how it was the king or the queen or whoever was the ruler, they were seen as divinely appointed by God, all right? And that is where their authority was derived from, the ruler. Now, Whether they were divinely appointed by God, whether they were not, whether it was a complete lie, that's a separate issue. But, and it could have been God, it could have been the gods if they were delusional polytheists, idol worshippers. But nonetheless, basically, this was a common trope in ancient civilizations, that one's authority as a ruler, it came from the fact that the divine had appointed it to him, right? It came from the top and it went down low, right? This was just, people understood this king was chosen by God, this queen was chosen by God or the gods or whatever. Now what we have today is, again, going in line with that whole secular lack of appetite for anything spiritual, of a higher order, higher nature. It's not government by God, but instead government by the people. This whole idea of democracy, right? So everything, the whole focus of the world that we live in, it's been removed, or the whole of our turning our heads high and looking to the divine for everything, it's been removed, and now we're looking towards ourselves, humanity, not towards the heavens, but rather towards the earth, to the terrestrial realm, as it were. And that, again, when you understand that, you really get how this world works. This whole idea, it's not, now people don't care about divinely appointed by God. People don't understand that concept. Now government, divinely appointed by the people, democracy. The people chose this person, therefore he should be in power. That's where his authority derives from. And, this has been a long and slow process of slowly, eroding away any sort of spiritual appetite and tendency that man has. And this is going to end up in just a horrible disaster very soon. God knows best when it's going to happen, but this is not going to go well for us, because man is fundamentally a spiritual creature. And again, I'm not waxing metaphysical. I'm talking about having an appetite for things other than just shopping and fornicating and base pleasures. Another thing that René Guénon mentions in his book, which is, I think, interesting for you to think about, is, and I highlighted this part and screenshot it because I wanted to save it. It was basically, he says that, the day and age that we live in, why is this light taking so long? Okay, yeah. So the day and age that we live in, the inventions that we're surrounded by, it seems that man has excelled in something, right? He has excelled certainly in his ability to subdue nature and make it do more or less what he wills. We have cars, we have iPhones, we have wireless connection. I go on and on about these things. And what he points out is essentially that, he talks about why does our civilization have all of these special abilities? Why are we able to subdue nature in the way that we do? And we, despite being so ignorant, so foolish, we don't know anything. We don't even know the difference between a man and a woman now, right? But we're able to subdue nature in such a way. Basically, he says that this comes from the fact that, like I said, the character of our civilization is a rejection of anything divine or sacred or holy or spiritual, etc. And because we've discarded all of those things of a higher order, questions of morality, destiny, our minds have been fully cleared out where all we think about is material stuff. This civilization, I'm not saying everybody in here, of course, I don't think like that. I'm assuming you don't think like that as well. But generally speaking, the character of the civilization is to only think about material things and have no care for the things of a higher order, higher nature. And this mentality, this philosophy is what has unlocked the material world to us. So we have, the Quran says, man has what he desires. We get what we want. So we have this vain, pathetic, materialistic mindset, and we have a vain, pathetic, materialistic world. Certainly, God has allowed us to have what we want. We wanted material goods and comfort and pleasure and no morality, no destiny, no purpose, and that's what we have, right? We have cars and iPhones and all this stuff, and it's essentially the way the civilization works, the kind of things we're surrounded by, it's an outgrowth. It is a consistent working out of the philosophy that underpins it. And, as Guénon points out, as what I'm pointing out to you, is that this is going to end up collapsing very soon. The judgment of God is coming upon this nation. So, I encourage you guys, and, sorry if this didn't make any sense, or if it seemed a little off the walls here and there, up and down and all around, but, I'm just reading this book and it's really blowing my mind, and I recommend you men as well, read it. René Guénon, The Crisis of Modernity. And he gives the world that we're living in context. And in fact, he's talking about stuff that I've been talking about for a while. I've been talking about this futurism in my Flat Earth Manifesto. I talk about it in the essay even that I just uploaded now on secularism, atheism, humanism, etc. I talk about these things, how this whole idea that man is progressing, we're progressively learning more as time goes by, and we're becoming smarter and more sophisticated and not like those base savages in the ancient world. And then this ties into as well the whole Darwinian evolution concept of, hey, in the beginning we started out as an amoeba, then we turned into a fish, then a monkey. Now look at man, how sophisticated we are, and then let us forecast into the future how more sophisticated we're going to become when we start combining ourselves with robots and artificial intelligence and this whole transhumanism thing. All this stuff goes together. And the way one views the world, and not what he claims to, not somebody who says they're a Christian, they go to church every Sunday, but then live their life like a Satanist for the rest of the week. But no, how one truly views the world and operates, it works itself consistently. It works itself out consistently in your life, and it transforms and changes everything about you. And the way that the majority of people here view the world, it has definitely colored the character of the civilization. We've been materialistic. All we care about is pleasure and fun and the Gibbs and all the cool stuff and all the nice gadgets. And we have that. It's been given to us. But because our minds have only been focused on those things, we've forgotten the divine. We've forgotten sacred things, scripture, God, morality, etc. But anyways, men, that's really all I have to say on the matter. I hope this talk was a blessing. And yeah, peace to you. Remember, deceit abounds, so keep your eyes wide open. Peace out.
Peace and blessings in the name of the Most High, viewer. My name is Walid Naim, and I am a zealous submitter to the one true God, the creator of all mankind. Do you notice something wrong with the world? Something strange? Despite us having a church, synagogue, and mosque in every neighborhood, how has this entire Western civilization fallen into abject atheism, nihilism, and savagery? Why does life just seem so dull, so meaningless, and so devoid of anything real in the Occidental world? Despite the ubiquitous presence of these religious institutions, why are our so-called Muslim sons in large numbers drinking, smoking, partying, and chasing after women, with no seeming desire to do anything more with their life other than satisfy their base pleasures, when God has commanded them to be clean, righteous, and responsible leaders of their community? And why are our hijabi so-called Muslim daughters walking around with tight jeans that reveal their figure, with TikTok accounts posting semi-provocative, self-absorbed videos of themselves online for the world to see, when God has commanded them to lengthen their garments and be modest in their mannerisms? What has happened here? These young men and women are supposed to be making themselves right before God while raising the next generation of ardent defenders of the holy faith. But it seems that Islam features no more in their lives other than a scarf on their head, a Friday fidgeting around in the mosque when their parents forced them to go against their will, or a decorative hanger in their car. At this rate, if God allows us to continue going down the road it is, then Islam and the Quran will become pretty much non-existent in the lives of most of our descendants, if it wasn't already non-existent now. If we do not take a stand soon, in a few generations, our children's children will likely be indistinguishable from the secular West. Is that the kind of world we want to live in? Our kids to live in? A world practically devoid of the remembrance of the one God and all things sane? I obviously can't speak for you, but for my own self, I can personally say, count me out of it. I'm not going to sit here and just watch my brothers and sisters, those who claim to believe in God alone, believe in Judgment Day, His prophets and angels, and all the other aspects of this holy creed, get duped into going to hell. I'm not going to let this happen without at least something of an effort on my end to reroute this dark trajectory. So, again, how in the world do we end up here? There is a mosque in practically every neighborhood in the West, and no shortage of donations that get dropped in their boxes. They have had lots of funding, lots of time, and unquestioning support from their respective congregations, yet somehow have been run over by the secular atheist. All of their so-called Muslim children go to the atheist, secular public schools for most of their week to be taught beliefs that are completely incompatible with the Quran. And we wonder why they have ended up the way they are. If these houses, and by these houses I mean the mosques, were truly of God, that were doing everything right, then why would our Lord let them get so decisively trampled upon by their enemies? Why do the wicked have all of the reins of power here? Clearly, something is not adding up. Well, it is my thesis here today that the vast, vast majority of mosques that exist in this world today have lost their way and follow a religion which is completely foreign to the Quran. This is why they have failed so miserably in the West, and it seems that God has forgotten them. In truth, the real reason behind their shortcoming is that they, and many of us, have forgotten God Himself, which is why He has left us here collecting our bitter receipts. So, what are my exact criticisms of the mosques today? As a Muslim and a man committed to the truth above all else, what are my personal gripes with their institution, which claims to be for God? The first glaring problem I can think of is that the majority of people who call themselves Muslim have allied themselves with a body of literature that is foreign to the Word of God, treating it equal to, and in fact above, the Quran itself. Of course, I am talking about the Hadith. Listen, the facts are this. There is no justification within the Quran which tells us to follow this hadith stuff, which came hundreds of years after the Prophet Muhammad died, and therefore he could have had no ability to oversee what people have said about him and determine if it is true or false. It is now becoming crystal clear, especially in the last 10 to 20 years, that many things that have been ascribed to him in their most quote-unquote authoritative texts, which they call their Sahih Hadiths, are forgeries that directly contradict God's final revelation. To take these words of men, i.e., the Hadith, and hold them to be equally authoritative to the words of God would be breaking the first and most important commandment, which is to worship God alone, making no equals with Him. To say that these supposed words of Muhammad, which are not even Muhammad's own words, but simply very doubtful rumors about what people who existed hundreds of years after him say he said, that have been decided upon by the scholars as authoritative holds equal, or in fact any weight in our faith comparable to the verbatim words of God Himself, the Holy Quran, is idolatry. You are exalting man's words to the status of divinity, which should only be given to God's words. Nothing comes even close to the Quran, because God, the creator of the heavens and the earth, is its author. This includes the Hadith too, which pales in comparison and is superfluous to the glorious Quran. If you are interested in seeing a full refutation of the Hadith, you may watch my video titled A Defense of Prophet Muhammad, David Wood and Hadith Exposed, which is linked below. In it, along with refuting and putting in his place the worst opponent of Islam on the internet, Mr. David Wood, I also expose how the Hadith is completely contradictory to the Quran and the source of much of the Muslim world's problems. It is a 2-hour-long documentary where I seek to demonstrate the true character of Muhammad in the Quran, defending his history and personality with primary source quotations. I clear the last prophet of God's name from the people who have tarnished his reputation the most, which are certain types of Christians, and, sad to say, Hadith-following Muslims, which have said many terrible things about him. No, Muhammad was not a money-hungry, tyrannical warlord who married a 6-year-old girl. He was a shy, humble, meek man who married adult women, had compassion for even his worst enemies, and oftentimes had a tough time even standing up for himself out of fear of hurting other people's feelings. This is all demonstrated in detail in my video. Once again, the link for that will be in the description under the tab, The True Character of Muhammad in the Quran. So that is the first problem with the mosques, the reason for which I feel they have been forsaken by God, their adoption of an apostate literature which contradicts their foundational scripture. The second point of contention I have with many of the mosques is their seeming unwillingness to say anything controversial which may make them face persecution from their government. The fact that 9/11 was not only an inside job, but the fact that no planes hit the Twin Towers on that day, and the whole charade was a hoax designed by the governments of the world to forever frame the Muslim people as terrorists and justify invasions in our countries, should be taught to every man, woman, and child. This great fraud of the September attacks has left such a lasting, enduring reputation on every brown person, and Muslim in general, that it should be discussed in every mosque. Our people are not responsible for that crime, but it was the governments of the world who carried out that plot and framed us for it. 9/11 is just only one small example, though. There are many, many other quote-unquote conspiracy theories, which are really just conspiracy facts, avoided by the mosques due to their controversy. like the fact that the monetary system in the West is an ungodly scam based on usury, the fact that the so-called healthcare system is a predatory empire which doesn't try to cure anybody, but instead makes money off of human suffering, the fact that sodomite propaganda is being promoted to the masses, including our children, and the fact that the thing which I will call the C19er, to avoid censorship, was a hoax perpetrated by the powers that be to greatly expand their police state, censorship incentives, and surveillance systems worldwide in order to create their new world order, and much more. These governments that have occupied our lands are de facto terrorist regimes, and the mosques seem to say nothing of it. They appear to be more concerned with not being labeled extremists while they live their comfortable, well-funded lives, avoiding topics that are hard to deal with due to the abject persecution they bring. That is my second problem with them. They're at the very least lack of awareness, or if not, perhaps lack of willingness to address the real geopolitical situation going on in the world. And lastly, my third trouble with the mainstream mosques, which can also be put into the category of conspiracy facts, is their complete ignorance on the true nature of the earth. It may sound as a shock to you, my viewer, that the Quran, the Bible, and in fact all of the ancient scriptures teach the earth is flat and stationary. This is the only model of the world which is compatible with those texts and also scientifically provable. This flat earth conspiracy, which should really be called the globe earth conspiracy, is one of the biggest lies of the modern world, we are told, and goes in line with what I said earlier about the endemic corruption of the governments of the world. Everything you have been told about where you live is a fabrication, and the space agencies are a shameless hoax. For a fully detailed presentation on the subject of flat earth, where I demonstrate the science, the history, the philosophy, the verses in the Bible and Quran proving it, and much more, you can read my book titled The Flat Earth Manifesto, which is linked in the description. This work runs to nearly 1,200 pages and is practically a textbook on not only the topic of flat earth, but the subject of physics proper, and I expose the biggest fraudulent religion of the West, which is science worship, otherwise known as scientism. As with all of my work, it too is available for free. No, you do not live on a pathetic speck of dust spinning around in the middle of nowhere in space. You live in a brilliant, intelligently designed terrarium created by God and are at the center of the universe. Again, to learn more, the link to the Flat Earth Manifesto will be in the description. Those right there are my three biggest scores against the mosques of today. There are more points I could bring up, but these are the major ones. These are the controversies which have estranged me from the rest of the so-called Muslim world. Believe me when I say that I would love to join them, and that it hurts me so deeply that I have to pit myself up against the very institution I was born and raised in, the mosques I attended from childhood, whose carpets upon which I walked, stood, prayed, and listened to the preaching in my earliest years. But that is the price to pay for the truth. My commitment to God and what is right is more important than my emotional attachments to a place that was once dear to my heart. Simply put, this is why I think God has forsaken us. This is why I think that the mosques have been steamrolled by the secular atheist. It is because most of us have abandoned the word of God, neglected preaching the truth, and instead chosen comfort over courageous action. That is my thesis to why this great falling away in the West has taken place. If this sounds shocking to you, if it sounds so unbelievable that the majority of the so-called Muslim world could be deceived so badly, then I simply have these verses in the Quran to show you. In the name of God, the Almighty and the Merciful. Chapter 6, verse 116. And if thou obey most of those upon the earth, they will lead thee astray from the path of God. They follow only assumption, and they are only guessing. Chapter 25, verse 30. And the messenger will say, O my Lord, my people took this Quran as a thing abandoned. God has really predicted this a millennia ago. He knew that the people who follow what is really right are few and far between, that the majority of men and women are led astray, and the people who claim to love Muhammad the most, i.e. mainstream Muslims, would abandon the glorious Quran. God has revealed to us 1,000 years ago that this all would be the case. It is my mission, therefore, by the will of God, to band together with like-minded believers who have understood the truth and work together to build a new institution from the ground up, founded upon prudent fear. We need to start fresh. Start anew. We need to build a new mosque where people can hear the unfiltered preaching from the Quran alone, where men and women can get married, where children can play and be educated in the truth, and where the name of the Most High God, without any associate partners, can be remembered. We need a group of highly dedicated men who will raise and defend this institution with their own hands if need be, and go out into the world warning people of the punishment of God, bearing witness to the truth of his oneness. That is my mission, my viewer. If you found that this mission of mine has touched your heart and is something you want to get involved with, then feel free to contact me in the email below. I am located in Ontario, Canada, and I'm looking forward to form a community with like-minded believers who want to contribute to this great cause. I am neither a nationalist nor racially biased. If you follow the Quran alone and believe in the truth, then as far as I'm concerned, you are my brother in the faith. I prefer you over someone of my own kindred who denies God and commits corruption in the earth. My loyalties are primarily ideological, not racial. Remember, my viewer, that this life is short. Everything we do and don't do is recorded by God and will either bear witness for us or against us on the day of judgment. Hell is eternal, and I do not know about you, but as for me, I want to meet my Creator in the best state possible. I want to spend my life struggling to build up my people, the true Muslims, so that God may be pleased with me on that day. If you are interested in that, then feel free to join me. If not, then find something else good to do which will prepare you for your appointment with the Most High. That is where we are all going anyway. With that being said, I say peace and God bless to all of you good people. Take care, everyone.